I'm Mark Ammons, and this is The Quiet Between. Some time ago, I found myself standing beside a quiet pond. The air was still enough that the trees seemed to be admiring themselves in the water. Everything was calm. Then I picked up a little stone and I tossed it gently into the pond. It wasn't much of a splash. In fact, if you hadn't been watching, you might have missed it altogether. But what happened next held my attention. One ripple became another, then another, and before long, circles of movement had spread across nearly the entire pond. The stone had disappeared almost immediately, but the ripples hadn't. And as I pondered that, I couldn't help but smile. Because nature has this wonderful way of teaching us things we didn't know we needed to remember. Then a couple of years ago, I heard this awesome song called Ripple from the movie Spirited. It isn't really about ponds at all. Instead, it's about a question that quietly stayed with me afterward. Can one ordinary life really make much difference? And I think most of us have wondered that at one time or another. Maybe not with those exact words, but we've all had moments when we questioned whether the little things we do actually matter. Does one encouraging conversation really make a difference? Or one handwritten note or a thoughtful text? Or an unexpected phone call? Or a sincere compliment? Or one afternoon spent listening instead of talking? The world has an interesting way of convincing us that significance belongs to the spectacular, the big achievement, the famous person, the headline everyone notices. Yet when I look back over my own life, that's not what has shaped me the most. Instead, I remember people. I remember that teacher who believed in me before I fully believed in myself. And that teacher for me was Mrs. Green. She was my junior high school music teacher. And she knew that I liked jazz because I played in the jazz band. I was a trombone player. So one day, Mrs. Green came to me and said, "Mark," now she spoke in a voice that was pretty gravelly because she'd been smoking for a long time. She says, "Mark, would you like to go and see this professional trombone player in Washington, D.C. at the Blues Alley?" And I said, "Well, Mrs. Green, that sounds great." "Well, I'll talk with your mom and see if that's okay." Sure enough, she called my mother and made arrangements for me, a 12-year-old kid, to go with Mrs. Green, my junior high music teacher, to see a famous jazz trombone player named Urbie Green. No relation to Mrs. Green. And it was an amazing night. It was an amazing experience that changed my outlook and my trajectory in life. Because from that moment on, I was sure that I wanted to be a professional musician and that I wanted to play jazz. And that was simply because a teacher took an interest in me and took the extra step to invite me to do something different. Now, in today's world, that probably wouldn't fly. But back then, it was a pretty cool thing. Then there are those people who quietly encourage us without expecting anything in return. There are friends who simply show up, People who probably never realized the influence they were having. At the time, none of those things seem extraordinary. They simply feel kind. But years later, we recognize the ripples. Now, I've had the privilege of teaching for many years, and every so often, a former student reaches out. Sometimes it's been decades, and they'll mention a conversation or a lesson that I had completely forgotten. To me, it was just an ordinary Tuesday. To them, it became part of their story. And when those moments happen, when those students reach out, the experiences they share with me humble me more than I can ever express. They've reminded me that we rarely get to choose which moments become meaningful in someone else's life. And that is truly a gift of this life. Because it means we don't have to wait for extraordinary opportunities. We simply have to be present in the ordinary ones. I believe that's how kindness has always worked. Not through dramatic gestures, but through countless quiet choices made by ordinary people. Holding a door, remembering someone's name, writing a thank you note, looking up instead of looking at a screen, making room for one more conversation when it would have been a lot easier to hurry home. These things don't seem especially important while they're happening, until one day somebody tells you that they never forgot what you did for them. I've noticed something else. Most people genuinely want to leave the world a little better than they found it. We want to encourage, to help, to forgive, to make someone else's load just a little lighter. Sometimes we simply underestimate the power of those small offerings. We imagine they disappear the moment they're given. But they don't. Because kindness behaves much more like ripples in a pond. Quietly moving outward, touching people we'll never meet, inspiring conversations we'll never hear, and becoming encouragement that someone else eventually passes along. What an exciting thought. Imagine discovering that one thoughtful moment from years ago is still making its way through someone else's life. Imagine realizing that hope has a longer memory than we do. And that makes me want to be just a little more generous today. Not because I'm trying to change the whole world, but because I might brighten one small corner of it. And perhaps, just maybe, that's enough. So, as you move through this week, I hope you'll remember that quiet pond. One little stone, one gentle splash, and one ripple after another. And if an opportunity presents itself to encourage someone, take it. Send the note. Make the call. Offer the smile. Stay for one more conversation. Who knows? Wouldn't it be wonderful if someone smiled this evening and they never knew it began with you? Thank you for spending these few quiet minutes with me. Until next time, may your days be filled with simple kindness, quiet joy, and the wondrous surprise of discovering just how far ripples can travel.